Hello, welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman, and today I'm joined by the great Bob Murphy, and we are going to talk about the rich, powerful, successful, weird person called Peter Thiel, um, who is like libertarian adjacent, I think. We'll get into that. And he was also just interviewed on a show called Interesting Times by Ross Douthat. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. But this conversation is really interesting, and it went into directions that you are going to be surprised by. I certainly was. And Thiel is an interesting fellow, and also a very powerful fellow these days. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Bob talking about Peter Thiel. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Adam.
So Peter Thiel sure is a rich weirdo, isn't he?
He's definitely rich. He's an unusual fellow, but some might say the same of you and me.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So I ask or mention Mr. Thiel because we're going to play some clips from a fascinating interview conversation he had on a show called Interesting Times with a fellow named Ross Douthat. Don't know how that gentleman's name is pronounced. But before we get
I
going,
think it's like do that, but I don't know
okay.
why I'm saying that. I think
You sound confident.
Yeah.
I'm willing to roll
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
But before we got rolling, I was just curious about your impression of the man. Like years ago, I heard, hey, us libertarians have kind of a rich tech guy in our, as count him among our members. Then I didn't really pay too much attention. And hey, PayPal's cool. But then he founds this Palantir thing, and his business partner or CEO or something, Alex Karp, seems like a weird, terrible person. And so, like, yeah, how are we supposed to think about Peter Thiel from our camp? Do you have any thoughts?
Can you, just for the listeners, I know I'm not like playing dumb. I really am dumb, folks. But I know I had seen some stuff, and I kind of found that I was like, oh, that's weird. Can you give any more detail as to why you're like more confident that you're not a fan of the other guy involved with Palantir?
Yeah, in fact, I'll link in the show notes to an episode of Haman Nature where we talk about Alex Karp being interviewed by Barry Weiss, and he just says some weird, crazy stuff about how it was a mistake for Silicon Valley and our tech industry in general to be serving the wishes of consumers. The height of business in America or technology in America was the Manhattan Project, and we really need to do more things serving the bigger picture, which he interprets as like military protection stuff, which is why he's the leader of Palantir, which is this weird AI data-driven military surveillance company whose stock I think is soaring right now with defense contracts and other things. Anyway, so I think he's a big goofy weirdo, and I fear him and his company. But I'll link to that episode.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, last thing, were you paraphrasing, or he literally said instead of serving consumers, we should be doing?
It's the
broader
thesis
things.
of a book he just wrote or co-wrote. He's far too important to actually write. He just says things, and then a guy who works for him wrote a book. But yeah, it was the point of the book, and the point of the interview. He thinks tech should be in the service of the government, or largely, or something, and that's not only good for the defense of the country, but it's like figuring out how to get pizzas to you cheaper and faster. He thinks that's just a waste of time, and I'm sure he hates everything about social media, but yeah, he really thinks that.
Okay.
So I don't think Peter Thiel does, but I don't know him that well. This is the first time I'd sat down and heard him have a conversation.
Yeah, I've tried to watch a few of his other things, and yeah, Peter Thiel was always somebody that like the name often came up. I listened to back when I was at Texas Tech, there was a period, folks, in my life where I kept driving back and forth between Houston and Lubbock, Texas, which, depending on which way you went, was a good 8-9 hour drive each way. And so I did a lot of podcast consuming in those days, Adam. And one of the things I listened to was a deep dive on how Thiel took down Gawker, like with the Hulk Hogan lawsuit and everything. And that was a fascinating story.
Yes,
so anyway, that's like the most I knew of him in terms of like in-depth coverage of what his deal was and what he was doing, besides just knowing, hey, he's some like libertarian guy that's wealthy and, you know, founded a few things. And then he also was the big backer of when Patrick Friedman launched the seasteading project.
right.
Thiel was a big backer of that. And I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag. The next guest, folks, that's dropping on the Bob Murphy Show is Patrick Friedman, talking about what he's been up to lately. So anyway, stay tuned.
Nice.
So other than that, but yeah, I had one guest on, I don't know if you remember this, Adam, when I had a guy on that was like, he was really into like all the conspiracy stuff with Klaus Schwab and all that. And so I had him on, he was like giving his research on the analysis he had done. And then he's like, oh, I'm working on some other projects too. And I was like, oh, can you give us a teaser? And he was like, wait till you hear the bombshell about how this Peter Thiel guy isn't what he purports to be. And I was in a really awkward spot because, you know, at that point, like Peter Thiel was kind of like a darling of the libertarian movement. And so I didn't want to like just but, you know, I didn't know what the guy's evidence was, you know what I mean? So anyway, it was just kind of awkward. And I was like, okay, well, thanks everybody. And we'll see you next time. So that was kind of the way that episode ended. So anyway, that's my long way of saying I have heard some strong allegations, but yeah, I don't know that much about him personally. And this interview that we're going to play some clips from you folks, I was just fascinating. And let me also say, some of these clips are on the longer side. And I don't think you're going to resent that though, folks, because it really, I guess this guy Ross Douthat, I was primed to not like him too, because like a lot of his written stuff, he's like an establishment, you know, toady or something. I don't know what word you want to use. At least that was the image I had. But yeah, with this is like, okay, that was a good interview, I thought, where he, you know, dragged or pulled a lot of stuff out of Thiel that maybe someone else would not have.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's fascinating. Shall we dive right in?
I think so.
A big part of Silicon Valley ended up going in for Trump in 2024, including, obviously, most famously, Elon Musk.
Yeah, this is deeply linked to the stagnation issue in my telling. I mean, and these things are always super complicated, but my telling is, you know, and again, I'm so hesitant to speak for all these people, but, you know, someone like Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook Meta, and, you know, in some ways, I don't think he's very ideological. He didn't think this stuff necessarily through that much. It was, the default was to be liberal, and it was always, what, you know, if the liberalism isn't working, what do you do? And for year after year after year, it was, you do more. You know, if something doesn't work, you just need to do more of it, and you up the dose, and you up the dose, and you spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and you go completely woke, and everybody hates you, and at some point, it's like, okay, maybe this isn't working.
So they pivot.
Yes,
right.
It's not a pro-Trump thing.
It's not a pro-Trump thing, but it is, you know, just both in public and private conversations, it is a kind of sense that Trumpism and populism in 2024, maybe not in 2016, when, you know, Peter was out there as the, you know, the lone supporter, but now in 2024, they can be a vehicle for technological innovation, economic dynamism, and so on.
You're framing it really, really optimistically here. So I
think I know you're pessimistic.
When you frame it this optimistically, you're just saying these people are going to be disappointed and they're just set up for failure, and things like this.
People expressed a lot of optimism. That's all I'm saying. Elon Musk expressed a lot of. I mean, he expressed some apocalyptic anxieties about how budget deficits were going to kill us all. But he came into government, and people around him came into government basically saying, we have a partnership with the Trump administration, and we're pursuing technological greatness. I think they were optimistic.
Yes.
And so you're coming from a place of greater pessimism or realism. So what I'm asking for is your assessment of where we are. Not their assessment, but like, Does populism in Trump 2.0 look like a vehicle for technological dynamism to you?
It's still by far the best option we have. I don't think, I don't know, is Harvard going to cure dementia by just puttering along, doing the same thing that hasn't worked for 50 years? So
that's just a case for it can't get worse. Let's do disruption, right? But the critique of populism right now would be Silicon Valley made an alliance with the populists, but in the end, the populists don't care about science. They don't want to spend money on science. They want to kill funding to Harvard just because they don't like Harvard, right? And in the end, you're not going to get the kind of investments in the future that Silicon Valley wanted. Is that wrong?
Yeah, but we have to go back to this question of, how well is the science working in the background? This is where, the New Dealers, whatever was wrong with them, they pushed science hard, and you funded it, you gave money to people, and you scaled it. And, whereas today, if there was an equivalent of Einstein and he wrote a letter to the White House, it would get lost in the mailroom, and the Manhattan Project is unthinkable. If we call something a moonshot, this is the way Biden talked about, let's say, cancer research. A moonshot in the 60s still meant that you went to the moon. A moonshot now means something completely fictional that's never going to happen. Oh, you need a moonshot for that. It's not like we need an Apollo program. It means it's never, ever going to happen.
He hinted at it at that clip, but throughout, his main thesis has been that, with the exception of the world of computers and digital stuff, that the U.S. is in a deep stagnation technologically, no advancement. How do you assess that theory, Dr. Murphy?
Yeah, and folks, again, with this stuff, it was what Ab's alluding to. Yeah, he starts out like a few minutes before that, like his main thesis was, that's what Duthat had him open the conversation with, about, like looking at, look at how much humanity progressed from 1900 to 1950, but then look from 1950 to 2000, and like, except for computers, there's nothing else really to write home about, that kind of thing. Tyler Cowen used to, he called it the Great Stagnation. I don't know if he coined that term or somebody else did. And I mean, if you go and look at their stuff, I'm not making this up. I think it was Scott Sumner actually said something like, it just looks like for some reason people stopped making new discoveries around the early 1970s. And I was like, that can't be right. It can't just be that we ran out of stuff to discover in the 1970s. I can think of something else that happened in the early 1970s. He might not have said early, but it was, anyway. I'm just saying there's all these trends, like the people on the left who complain about income inequality, like this, Sayez and what's that guy, Piketty and those people, Zuckman. They have all these charts showing how inequality, peaked in the 20s, the roaring 20s, and all the coming off the Gilded Age, and then the Depression kind of, whacked them, and then all the New Deal programs, and then the Great Society, but it was all chugging along great. Inequality's falling in the U.S., like in terms of how much of the total wealth is the top 1% owned, that kind of thing. And then for some reason, it just turns around in the 70s. So anyway, where I'm going with this, of course, folks, is that I think when Nixon finally delinked the dollar from gold, that caused a lot of stuff that even like hard money economists, laissez-faire types don't fully appreciate. And so, if it looks like for some reason things just stalled starting around the 70s for some reason, I wouldn't be, I would much rather blame something like, delinking the dollar from gold than just, we kind of made all the discoveries like that. That's ludicrous to me. And again, but just to be clear, folks, Peter Thiel did not say those exact words. He was just talking about this general, like, it just seems like, stagnation, and we're not making new advances, whether you're talking healthcare, transportation, blah, 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 manufacturing. And whereas, like I said, the other thing, like it was one of those Mercatus, GMU guys literally said is a possible explanation for this, that, the people just stopped making, we ran out of stuff to discover or invent. So that's kind of my general reaction to that element of his worldview.
I mean, if it's true that we're stagnating in any way, you can't run counterexample. I would link to, I point to the government, obviously, as the first culprit, with the fiat money and then a bunch of regulations. But as Thiel was talking, he was alluding to people being afraid of the future rather than thinking, it's man's duty to conquer this world and tame it to our ends. But then in the 60s, you started having a big movement in the culture saying that man is the problem here.
Mm-hmm.
We're ruining the world. There's too many of us. We're causing environmental disasters. We're killing species. And if that sort of a mind virus infects the public, you could see where it would lead to people just sitting on the couch and watching TV, on the margin, rather than trying to go build something and put physics and do all those dominating things that Peter Thiel wishes we were doing more of. And I think that was a pretty big effect in the culture.
So to be clear, folks, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, you know what it is? It's because stupid Richard Nixon in 1971. That's not what I'm just saying. To me, it would be pointing to things like that as opposed to just, well, yeah, I mean, after E equals MC squared, what else was there? And yeah, like I think what you're thinking, just like on that point, I don't know if this is historically accurate, but I had this sense from the limited amount of reading and probably seeing something on a George Clooney movie or something. But I had this notion that like the World's Fair in the late 1800s, when they were unveiling, or the early 1900s, like was just much more optimistic about, what they thought the future was going to hold. Whereas you're right. I think more recent things, it would be like, oh, and look we have all these 8th graders with all their different ideas about how to combat climate change. And you know what I mean? As opposed to, this is how we're going to figure out how to get to some distant galaxy by tunneling through, a wormhole or something, so I think you're right that there's just real pessimistic and yeah, among other things, well, you wouldn't want to come up with a way to feed all the world's people. We already have too many people. That would make it worse. You got to come up with a way to, how do we, stop the birth rate in Africa or something, as opposed to how do we feed those people? So I think, yeah, that I agree with. I do have to say, though, the irony, my running joke with you, Adam, isn't it just, again, it's always, I mean, we had the moon landing. If it turns out that didn't happen, there's going to be this trump card that a lot of people, and also, did you ever see the Seinfeld thing, the comedians in cars or whatever that was called?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Where the show that Jerry said, okay. So one of them, be a better anecdote if I could remember which comedian it was. I think it was one of the guys that's typically clean, not the food guy, but I think the other guy, and I'm blanking on his name. But anyway, they were, the episode was that guy, and they're out and they're looking over they stop, and somehow they're talking about the moon landing, and the guy, he had the premise, like I don't know if he ever actually deployed it, but he was like saying he's working on this joke where, how people always say, I mean, if we can put a man on the moon, and they try to show why you should be able, and he said, imagine if the Apollo missions had failed, and then it would just always be the opposite, like whenever something blew up in your face, it's like, well, I mean, it's not like we could put a man on the moon. So anyway, I thought it was kind of funny.
He made one other point that sort of ties into, we've been talking about, we were just talking about Sagar and Jetty and Charlie Kirk, Don Tucker, talking about, problems with the economics, and they were talking about the young people not having a shot, but also the middle class getting left behind. And Thiel felt quite strongly in this interview that if you don't have vibrant advancement, if you don't fix the stagnation problem, it's going to also mean we're going to not have a middle class anymore.
Right.
Like he was saying that, you can't have all the development in Silicon Valley. That's just not going to work for everybody else in the country. And I didn't know what to make of it, but I thought it was an interesting argument. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I definitely, it's weird, right? Because on the one hand, and I'm not saying Peter Thiel's doing this, there is a definitely thing we got in the clips later, folks, where he does kind of do a zinger on Elon in terms of like, is his worldview internally consistent with, being, so anyway, but we won't spoil it.
Yeah.
We'll wait to, but, it is interesting too how on the one hand, like people are worried about AI either taking all our jobs or enslaving and or killing us all, like Terminator style, and also saying, oh, there's a great stagnation. I mean, geez, except for this little dinky thing over here of like the computer sector or tech, we're not doing anything. Like there seems to be some kind of dissonance there. Also, I was surprised, especially as we just isolated in that clip there. Again, if you listen to the whole interview, he's all over the place, and it's, you just get this more balanced tapestry of his worldview. But just right there in that clip, that is prima facie surprising that he didn't say that, oh yeah, part of the reason for this, the stagnation now, geez, if Einstein came along or today's Einstein and said, we need to do such and such, but you know what? All these entrepreneurs and VCs would have all these great ideas, but the bureaucrats in Washington wouldn't give them approval. No, that's not what he said. He said if today's Einstein wrote and said, we need the Manhattan Project, it would get lost in the, you know what I mean? So isn't that weird that like he's lamenting how the federal government is not willing to fund things the way they allowed us to create the atomic bomb, and that's really it seemed, again, I'm sure if you asked him to tease that out, he would probably say something that I would say, oh, okay, maybe he'd even catch himself. But it was funny there that what he was lamenting was not Washington busybody micromanaging and like, just get out of our way and let us build. It was instead, you need to fund us the way that the New Deal did. Like, at least say what you will about the New Deal, but at least they weren't afraid for Washington to spend a bunch of money. Like, that's a weird thing for the libertarian hero to be saying.
Yeah, I was just about to make that exact point. Calm down, Mr. Libertarian, as you talk about having the government fund science through these, universities like Harvard and whatnot. There isn't a better way.
Yeah. But I should say, as I always say when we criticize Tucker Carlson, same thing here. Mr. Thiel, like, if you want to talk about anything, like, just look me up.
Yeah, if we weren't fans, we wouldn't talk about you at all. Before we move on, do you want to tell our listeners the good news?
Oh yeah, someplace where there's not stagnation. So, folks, for a while, as these crossover episodes have been gaining in popularity, and some of you have expressed to me that you look forward to them, and that and truly, Adam, I really did have a guy say last week when I was at Mises U, he said, hey, the stuff you're doing with Adam, Adam Haman is awesome. I'm not even just making that up. So as implausible as the anecdote may sound to some.
I like that generic fella quite a bit.
Yeah. So anyway, what I was thinking though is so Adam and I have been thinking for a bit, should we have an advertiser that's just like, because we have our own podcast, so it's kind of, how would you do it? And then also too, but this kind of thing, okay, so if we're going to do something, we want it to be a campaign that's going to go the distance, that we're not just going to like hold up, oh, wow, this stuff tastes better than my normal Gatorade, and we do it for 3 weeks or something. So anyway, we have found the perfect sponsor for these crossover episodes, and they are the Swan Brothers. So Adam, do you want to explain to the good folks who these guys are and what they do?
Sure. I know one of the Swan Brothers personally, a friend of mine, and what they are is, the company that helps you get your logo on all sorts of swag and gear and clothes and shirts and hats and hoodies and all that stuff. Specifically by helping you, actually doing it for you, making an online merch store that you would use to maybe fundraise if you're an athletic program in a school or something, or if you want to just boost employee morale at your law firm or your church or your club, anything you'd want to do where you just want to put your logo on things to get your brand out there, your name recognition, all the usual reasons people put stuff on merch and wear it or give it away. They do this for you, and they're like the best in the business, and so I'm very thrilled to be promoting them on our little crossover shows.
That's right. So, folks, if you're interested and you want to see more, go to theswanbrothers.com/cross, so they'll know that you're coming from these crossover episodes. And Swan is SWAN, theswanbrothers.com/cross. Go check it out.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to clip 2. You ready?
I am ready.
But I guess where I end up is I still think we should be trying AI, and that the alternative is just total stagnation. So yeah, there's sort of all sorts of interesting things going to happen with, okay, maybe drones in a military context are combined with AI, and okay, this is kind of scary or dangerous or dystopian, or it's going to change things. But if you don't have AI, wow, there's just nothing going on. And I don't know, there's like a version of this discussion on the internet where did the internet lead to more conformity and more wokeness? And yeah, there are all sorts of ways where it didn't lead to quite the cornucopian, diverse explosion of ideas that libertarians fantasized about in 1999. But counterfactually, I would argue that it was still better than the alternative, that if we hadn't had the internet, maybe it would have been worse. AI is better. It's better than the alternative, and the alternative is nothing at all. Because here's one place where the stagnationist arguments are still reinforced. The fact that we're only talking about AI, I feel, is always an implicit acknowledgement that but for AI, we are like in almost total stagnation.
But the world of AI is clearly filled with people who, at the very least, seem to have a more utopian, transformative, whatever word you want to call it, view of the technology than you're expressing here, right? And you were mentioned earlier the idea that the modern world used to promise radical life extension and doesn't anymore. It seems very clear to me that a number of people deeply involved in artificial intelligence see it as a kind of mechanism for transhumanism, for transcendence of our mortal flesh, and either some kind of creation of a successor species or some kind of merger of mind and machine. And do you think that's just all kind of irrelevant fantasy? Or do you think it's just hype? Do you think people are trying to raise money by pretending that we're going to build a machine god, right? Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in this.
Should the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also would I also would like us to radically solve these problems.
Right.
And so, it's always, I don't know, transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or I don't know, a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses. And a transsexual is someone where you change your, penis into a vagina. And we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way, the critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul, and you need to transform your whole self. And so,
right. But the other, wait. I generally agree with what I think is your belief that religion should be a friend to science and ideas of scientific progress. I think any idea of divine providence has to encompass the fact that we have progressed and achieved and done things that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But it still also seems like, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace. And the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
So I'm a little disturbed that the rich billionaire who's funding AI in service of the military isn't quite sure whether he wants humanity to endure or not.
Yeah, that was Folks, you may have seen there was a clip from this interview that went viral where Duthad later is going to like ask him on if he's the Antichrist. We didn't include that literal thing because I thought that was, people hit that to death, but also because I thought the other stuff was more interesting. But yeah, to me, that hesitation there, and to his credit, again, Duthad was like, he didn't just let it go. He was like, what do you, he like forced him to answer, and that was weird. So there's two things. So one is like the sort of sinister interpretation. Well, there's three. One is just innocuous, that he was trying to come up with the answer and was like, was like to answer like more fully the thing that Duthad was asking about, and he didn't think it was necessary to like, of course humanity. But what I'm trying to get at is blah, 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 right? So there's that, innocuous one. Another one that I think also could work is, I could imagine in a different context, especially if I wasn't primed to be ready for it, if somebody in some other area asked me, I might hesitate because given my biblical views, it's like, well, if I'm, my cousin and I are in our Bible study are going through the book of Revelation right now. It's just saying this is what's going to happen. So I no longer think as I did when I was 22 and an atheist that like, oh yes, of course we should do everything to, to continue the human, like, it's sort of like, it's already written. So what does it mean to, to say, should they get, it's like kind of saying, should the sun ever go out or not? It's like, well, it's going to happen. You know what I mean? So there could be that element to it as well, where it just seems like a nonsense question. And, Thiel is religious. And so, there's that element as well. And as we'll see later, he's very much thinking about the book of Revelation. And so perhaps that could be the thing too. But again, as you say, the other one is, he and his billionaire buddies are really kind of just disgusted with, I mean, can you imagine, like, how you and I get annoyed with the rubes on social media? And it was like, come on, can you imagine, like, if you're that level where you're jet setting and you like, you maybe don't set the policy of governments around the world, but the people who do, and you really know how stuff happens, and you can just see how 99.9% of humanity has no clue what's going on, and they're so confident in their ignorance and just gullibility, and it's like, if you're allowing these people just to rule you like this, then you deserve it. I could see them falling into that mentality.
Sure, yeah.
So
the more influence you have, the more hubris could creep into your soul. I mean, I was just joking. I think he vapor locked because he was thinking of the meta question, rather than the obvious one. And there's the element, it was baked into a question about all this, transing into machine and the singularity and all that. And you might, if someone was asking you, should the human race survive in that context, you might pause and go, well, not no matter what. I mean, not like that. I mean, you can imagine a purist would just, I'd prefer we actually just stay humans and not merge with machines. That's weird.
That's what I thought you meant, the other way around. That you were, not that you would have endorsed it, but I thought you were saying, I guess you could call this the sinister view too, like just that someone who thinks, I think 500 years from now, our descendants are going to be half man, half machine. You'll be fused with your flying thing, and you're going to have your computer brain that lets you think 10 times as fast and have supervision. That they might have been just pausing to think, well, what do you mean by that question? Because I'm not sure what my answer is. Then, depending on our definition, that could be that too. Which I guess you might think is sinister. I don't know. So but I guess what I'm saying is I could see someone hesitating to answer, and then even after further review, their answer being no, but not because they're for genocide, but rather no, because we're going to evolve to some higher thing that we're no longer, this is going to be Homo sapiens anymore, or something like that. Not that I'm cool with that, but I could see someone thinking, no, I'm a decent person. I want what's best for everybody, and just like I want to be a cyborg, I think everybody would want to be a cyborg.
I think this is all fascinating stuff, and I can't wait to see what they do come up with. But I got to imagine that the first iterations of things like that will just be sort of a robot copy of you, at best. Build some chatbot LLM and put it in some sort of an android, but it's not going to have anything to do with you. You'll be gone. But somebody might. If the LLM is good enough, maybe You know,
Oh, yeah.
I think you're still around or something, but
Yeah, I was listening to something a while ago about like some guy who uploaded his dad into the computer or something.
yeah.
Do you remember that? And
Yeah. Same.
like it was a cute, again, it was worth me listening to while I was cleaning up the house or whatever the heck I was doing. But I repeatedly thought throughout that, like, okay, but his dad is not in the computer. You know what I mean? Like, what?
There's been a couple, or at least one Black Mirror episode that deals with that pretty well.
Mm-hmm. It's like when you go see like somebody doing a performance and being Mark Twain for the crowd. You know, it's like,
You're right.
it's not that, oh my gosh, they uploaded Mark Twain into that bag of cells right there. Like, no, they didn't. The guy's doing an impression of Mark Twain. So
I don't know why it makes me think of it, but you're familiar with the show Star Trek and the Transporter?
yes.
I'm with Dr. McCoy. You know, I think you die on the pad there, and then something else ends up on the surface of the planet, constructed out of the molecules there.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about it, you just die each time you use the thing.
I guess it must not have been with you. I must have said it on a solo episode that hasn't dropped yet. But I recently explained to the good listeners of the Bob Murphy Show, but they haven't heard it yet, Adam, that in high school, you might think that when you took a break from dating the cheerleaders? Yes. I ordered the manual that they use for Star Trek The Next Generation, like for people who wanted to submit scripts to the show. They had a manual like to describe the physics of it. And one of the things they covered was like, you can't have episodes involving like somebody beams up from the planet and then they like double the streams on the pad in the ship so that like 2 copies of the person gets made. So they explain why that can't happen. So you see the problem they would have, right? Like they have to explain why you can make one version, but you can't make multiple ones because otherwise that you could just see that would open up Pandora's box. Anyway, so they had to kind of, I forget, what they did. They used a good analogy. And someone of your age will appreciate this, Adam. Do you remember? It was like when you first got the ability to take like a VHS tape and record, the football game or something. And the quality of that was always terrible compared to the live stream.
Mm-hmm.
And so somehow they came up with a thing like this. That was certainly why, like, you couldn't just store it, right? It wasn't just like, oh, well, once, Picard beams up, doesn't the computer know what it did to just reconstruct him and just make it, if this guy dies, we'll just, hit go again and pretend like he beamed up again. Just use the same, it's zeros and ones. And they showed like, well, no, that would be like the VHS tape. That's not the same thing as the live transmission. I forget now, though, as I'm telling you this, because you could be watching the game and have it on in multiple TVs in your house, the live game. And so why couldn't they have done that? And I don't remember what their answer was for that, but they did have one. So yes, to answer your question, I'm familiar with the Transporter.
Yes, you are. Boy, that's what I get for asking that question. All right.
It's like saying, did you ever think about money in high school? Yes, I did.
Are you familiar with this thing that you can use to buy goods and services? All right. Here's clip number 3 of Peter Thiel.
A conversation I had with Elon, a few weeks ago about this was he said, we're going to have 1 billion humanoid robots in the U.S. in 10 years. And I said, well, if that's true, you don't need to worry about the budget deficits because we're going to have so much growth. The growth will take care of this. And then, he's still worried about the budget deficits. And then this doesn't prove that he doesn't believe in the 1 billion robots, but it suggests that, maybe he hasn't thought it through or that he doesn't think it's going to be as transformative economically,
right,
or that there are big error bars around it.
I always get a little uncomfortable when I accuse somebody that rich and successful of being an idiot. But what Thiel said there was real stupid, right?
Oh, really? Go ahead. Oh, okay. Maybe I missed it too. I'm just not rich. I'm middle class and stupid.
I think that Elon is right to be worried about the debt because there's no amount of increase in productivity that AI and robots can achieve that politicians won't just spend faster. Unless DOGE was supposed to fix, systemic structural problems and with government overreach and waste and all that. I mean, if we don't do anything about that problem, why wouldn't we think that they would just spend more and more and more and more? regardless
Okay.
of how much.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying. I think in fairness, though, Thiel could just say, look, like if the issue is, I mean, do you agree, Adam, that like if they discovered untold deposits of oil and gold and diamonds and so on, like that had a $20 trillion present market value, even accounting for the fact that like it would push down the prices of, if all this new gold and oil hit the market, that would be helpful in terms of, oh geez, how are we gonna?
It would be very helpful, and so will the robots. I'm not saying that that he's wrong about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying to be that dismissive about the debt and how politicians like to spend. I think it's crazy to just dismiss that like Elon's stupid. Like he was saying it to the point of where maybe Elon doesn't even think he's going to be able to build these robots and they're going to be as productive as he says. Because otherwise, how is this smart guy, not just immediately not care about the 37 trillion in climbing? I mean, he thought that was just a slam dunk. I don't.
I mean, I guess so, but I'm saying like whatever it is that Elon thinks ought to be done is going to just be so much. Like if you just snap your fingers and all of a sudden everybody in the United States had triple the IQ and twice the strength that they did yesterday, wouldn't that make it easier to solve all of our fiscal problems?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of what he's getting. It's like we have a billion workers show up who aren't ever going to call in sick, who aren't going to steal, who have an IQ of whatever 95, let's say, for most jobs or something, and they also are willing to, they work for a very low wage, like sustainable, and how much they need to eat per hour is like $2 an hour, and they generate 50. Anyway, that's what he's getting at. So,
oh yeah, I agree. It's going to be incredible if he can pull it off.
Right.
Which makes me want to ask you, where do you land on that? Do you think that's coming?
Right. So probably, maybe the reason I was more sympathetic to Thiel, again, that's why I like these crossovers. It's amazing. It's the Adam Haman guy. He's good. He doesn't just, he's not just a yes man. Is I ran into that myself. Unfortunately, I wasn't contradicting myself, but I've been for so long about, oh my gosh, the Fed blew up this big asset bubble, and it's bad, and yeah, I think there was a partial correction in 2021 or whatever 2020 because of COVID, but that to me wasn't the big one, and there was still all this stuff they did in these imbalances. But then also when I guess ChatGPT 3.5 I think came out, I was really impressed by it, and I started just doing back of the envelope calculations and showing how, like, even if they don't improve more, once businesses just brainstorm and figure out how to, this is like, I was coming up with just, again, back of the estimates, it's like as if we had all these workers just show up with the characteristics I talked about. Like, surely that would, and then I was worried, like, oh, did I just kind of, erase my point? And certainly I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, I wasn't going to say, oh, see, I told you. Like, I was trying to, like, be honest with myself and say, and it worked out where I still thought that, yeah, there was going to be short-term crisis, but long-term, economic gains and sort of, Jetson's world thing, even though there would still be the, surveillance state on top of that. Sort of like in the world of the Matrix, they have really cool technology, but it's not a pleasant place to live.
I don't know.
So, yeah. So anyway, that's my long-winded way, Adam, of saying, yeah, I do think, like I don't know if you've heard that, yeah, that the Billionaire Bunker episode I did recently, where I was going through, like, I think that stuff is coming, where, yeah, there are going to be robot armies, and either like literally in the fighting machine sense, but also in this, like, meaning they go into factories and they make stuff and they just go out and do it. And yeah, when there's a storm and you need somebody to go out and fix all your shingles and rebuild the bridges, and like, you just look out, oh, you got the robots doing it. Like, I think that's coming. In the dystopian element of that is now the people who are always bringing up, like, oh, there's a secret depopulation agenda. And I always used to poo-poo that and say, well, no, because they need us to fix their private jets and stuff. And I was like, uh-oh, what if there's robots? So anyway, yeah, I think it's not going to be a game changer, forgive me for using that phrase, in the next 5 years, but I do think 15, 20 years that, yeah, this stuff is going to revolutionize it. And I try to be more careful when I'm making long-term, budgetary predictions and things, that there should be this asterisk in there to say that, yeah, these are the trends right now. But, if this happens, just like if aliens showed up and gave us all kinds of technology, that could change things.
It was interesting. I'm pretty sure Thiel was talking about AI when he said this. But he didn't think it was going to be like a game changer. He thought it was going to have a big effect, but more like, the effect the internet had on the economy.
Yeah. Well, even there, I forgot to mention that at the time. That what was your reaction to that? Like, to me, like, this is what you and I are doing right now. I mean, the fact that they're trying to shut down Tucker now. I mean, to me, it seems like the trajectory of global affairs can be influenced by people with podcasts now, whereas that was clearly not the case 20 years. And I don't just mean podcast, but you get what I'm saying. Like, there was no way for us to get our message out except, I mean, the Mises Institute used to physically mail articles by Murray Rothbard to subscribers or people who would write in and ask for it, or call, and I should say. They used telephones and say, yes, I want to get on your mailing list. And so then we'd send, and they would be thinking like, oh, we're sending it now to another person who knows the truth. I mean, can you imagine?
Surprised. Yeah, I was surprised to hear him poo-poo that. And is it like you were alluding to a little while ago when, these elites from their enormous mansions looking on social media and just seeing the bulk of humanity that's just useless and stupid and, sharing TikTok videos. Maybe he only sees what he would call the not useful stuff rather than seeing what you and I see, which is this amazing proliferation of meaningful content and dialogue. And, we're thrilled because Scott Horton and Dave Smith are talking to Tucker on a platform that's way bigger than. Yeah, I was surprised when he seemed so unimpressed by.
Yeah, I mean, with all this stuff too, it's a human tendency, like, you just take for granted.
Sure.
Stuff is like, you have kids, but like, you're really upset with your kids. Oh, you're gonna go to the store, and then for 18 seconds, if you lose track of the little one, and you're just like, and then you find and then you forget about that, and then they're like, quit fighting with your brother, So it's anyway.
Yeah, you can usually. That's why you got to keep taking the white pill so you don't get complacent.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think this last one we're going to learn that Peter Thiel is the Antichrist.
Fire. And so the atheist philosophical framing is one world or none. That was a short film that was put out by the Federation of American Scientists in the late 40s. Starts with the nuclear bomb blowing up the world, and obviously you need a one world government to stop it. One world or none. And the Christian framing, which in some ways is the same question, is Antichrist or Armageddon. You have the one world state of the Antichrist, or we're sleepwalking towards Armageddon. One world or none, Antichrist or Armageddon, on one level are the same question. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but sort of one question is, and this was a plot hole in all these Antichrist books people wrote. How does the Antichrist take over the world? He gives these demonic, hypnotic speeches, and people just fall for it. And so it's this plot hole. It's this daemonium.
Right. It's implausible.
It's a very implausible plot hole.
Right.
But I think we have an answer to this plot hole. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop. And this is what you need to regulate. It's the opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century, where, the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world. People are way too scared for that. In our world, the thing that has political resonance is the opposite. The thing that has political resonance is we need to stop science. We need to just say stop to this. And this is where, I don't know, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove, Edward Teller type person taking over the world. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
I love the science of bacon. It's nice to see him mention that.
Mm-hmm. How'd you feel about that clip?
Uncomfortable.
My favorite part was when he said, and this is something I thought a lot about. Huh? It was like, yeah, I like it.
And we alluded to it earlier, and the interviewer, he vapor locked Peter Thiel again by suggesting that, with all the things he's working on, he might be building the tools for one world government authoritarian control that you're worried about. Kinda.
Yeah. So on this one, my immediate reaction, which I guess is partly a laugh line, but is to say, well, I think the Antichrist is going to be like extremely attractive. So it can't be Greta Thunberg.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Not the right genes. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think he's right that if such a thing were to come to pass, it would be because they use the thing that always seems to work, which is to make everybody afraid of something. We seem to roll over for any abuse as long as we think we're in danger. I mean, he's a Christian and he's framing things. Is his terminology correct? Like theologically, is the Antichrist the right metaphor or whatever?
Yeah. Yes. So in the book of Revelation, there is an actual person. So it's not the devil, right? Like the Antichrist is a human being. I think different people have views about like maybe he literally makes a deal with the devil, or just is this predestined or whatever. Like just knows his destiny and grows into it or whatever. But so he might have supernatural abilities and things, but he's not. He's originally born a human, and as the name suggests, like he just opposes Christ. And so that's where the term is. So that's an actual term in the book of Revelation. That's not just like a metaphor or something, or a turn of phrase. So that is correct as far as he goes there. With this stuff, again, folks, there was so much stuff that we just want to give you a taste, because they get into all kinds of. So there, I didn't have any problem with the theology and to answer your question, but later on when he was going through with, like, is God ultimately, like, it seemed like Thiel was not willing just to say, like, no, God is ultimately in control, and what are you talking about? Like, everything's going to happen. Like, that, to me, that's kind of like the standard reading. Like, the ending is already, if you're a Christian, you don't need to worry about this stuff, except, just keep telling people the truth. And, also there is a sort of, not fatalism about it, but it's not like, oh, if we just work really hard, we can prevent the Antichrist from taking over the world. Like that. Like, no, it's saying that's going to happen. And then ultimately, though, Jesus is going to come back and, game over. So
he used a couple phrases that I wanted to ask you about. The one he describes as left wing, one world or none. I get that argument.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have one world government. Otherwise, we're going to nuke each other, or I don't know, something. There needs to be more control, and only a one-world government can give us that. So I understand that. But then he said the right-wing version is Antichrist or Armageddon, and I wasn't sure what he meant by that.
Yeah, let me hear. Thank you. You're right. I didn't understand what he meant there either. But again, that ties into what I was saying. Seemed to be his like loosey-goosey stuff that we didn't include in the clip. So here, I'll read from the AI overview. That's got to be accurate. The Battle of Armageddon, as described in the book of Revelation, is a symbolic climactic conflict between good and evil, ultimately resulting in the triumph of Jesus Christ. It's portrayed as a great war that will occur at the end of the world, involving armies from around the globe gathered at a place called Armageddon. So that's why they call it, that, even though now, people just kind of use Armageddon to mean the end of the world, or just a really bad thing, or a really big battle. But it's a place in the Bible. While often interpreted as literal physical battle, many scholars use a symbolic representation of a spiritual conflict. So, right, I don't understand what he meant. Well, if you're a Bible-believing Christian, you ask me, you say, oh, Bob, which is it, the Antichrist or Armageddon? I would say, well, it's both. The Antichrist is going to take over, and he's like, serving the prince of this world, who's the devil. Like, there's a sense in which, for whatever reason, God's in charge of everything, but he allows Satan to run rampant for a time on earth, and lets him do his nefarious things. God doesn't do evil, but he allows Satan in certain circumstances to do things within limits. And And so, yeah, the Antichrist is going to take over. That's going to happen. It's not like the Bible says, unless you pray hard enough, this might happen. Like, it doesn't say it. No, he's taking over. And then, there's going to be a battle of Armageddon, and ultimately the good guys win. Right? So I don't, the way he's like showing that there's a contrast, like, which do you want? It doesn't make any sense to me. But again, that ties into the stuff we didn't show later on when Ross Douthat is pressing him about, well, do we have any influence? Like, it gets into like free will versus, God's sovereignty, that kind of stuff, which is tricky. But again, if you think biblical prophecy is correct, which it seemed like Thiel was adhering to, then that stuff's going to happen. I'm not expecting you to believe it, Adam. I'm just saying it's weird for someone to be saying, yeah, I'm worried about the Antichrist because I read the Bible and I'm a Christian. And so, it's, I mean, in fairness, all the, New World Order, right wing, John Birch type, but it's, I think it's more just like, hey, this is what's coming. And you don't want to have the mark of the beast. You know what that is? That's, if they put the chip in your forehead that allows you to sign into your Tesla, that's what it, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, sure, it's not so much that if they're being accurate, and I hope if you talk to them and they say, wait a minute, it's not that they're saying, oh, so you're just saying if you can warn enough people, we'll avert this from happening. Like, well, no, because that would make the Bible wrong. But it's kind of like, just for the same reason you would spread the gospel, even if you believe God picked everybody from before the start of the world. There is a weird sense in which, what's the point of me telling you about Jesus? Because didn't he already put in? Yeah, but Jesus told you to spread the good news, so that's what I'm doing.
As is during that part of the conversation, I just found it very easy to picture Peter Thiel sitting around in his penthouse trying to figure out which one of the characters in that story is him,
Mm-hmm.
Just because he's, prince of the world and all like that. The interviewer...
sorry, can I just say one thing on that? So, yeah, maybe I should... I was trying not to be, do the obvious stuff, Adam. Maybe we should just give them the red meat, but people were... That clip that went viral that happened like 2 minutes after the one we just ended there. I didn't think Douthat was actually literally saying to Peter Thiel, have you considered that you're the Antichrist? I think he was just saying that you're building the tools that the Antichrist is going to use. How do you feel about that? Do you agree that that's what he was actually asking, even though obviously people took it to, it was easier to summarize and tweet out and say, oh, look at Peter Thiel doesn't know if he's the, is caught flat-footed when he's the
I think that's exactly right. I was joking earlier. Yeah, he's building the tools, the Grand Vizier for the Antichrist or something. It was just kind of a throwaway line, but the interviewer, he casually mentioned that AI could solve potentially the knowledge problem that beset socialist totalitarian governments that came before it. And given, what Hayek has to say about it, and even more importantly, Mises, I just thought that was an interesting thing for this guy to say.
Just to be clear, you not in the actual clips we played, you're just saying in that interview?
In that interview, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on that, just in case people want to know, you see that bandied about a lot, that, oh, yeah, I mean, maybe Mises had a point back in the day, but, with the rise of supercomputers. And, I mean, the quick way to dispose of that is to say, well, no, because in a market economy that relies on the price system to handle those kinds of issues, the supercomputer, whatever the stock of supercomputers you have in their capacity, could be deployed to doing other things. It frees them up. Instead of having to help the planners micromanage the economy, they can go, figure out the best way to go build a colony on Mars or whatever, extract more fish from the ocean or whatever you want to do. And so there's an opportunity cost. It's not just, if you had to use the supercomputers to do what the decentralized price mechanism could also do, then you can't use it to do these other cool things. So it's not, that's a non sequitur for that reason alone. But I mean, there's other issues too. But anyway, for that reason alone.
Yeah, I mean, the super AI couldn't come up with markets for capital goods for such that prices arise. But do you think it's possible that AI...
Can I stop you, though? Just to be anal. But I'm saying even if they could, it would be, at best, the correct solution for an economy that didn't have those supercomputers, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you had a bunch of supercomputers and then they could simulate oh, here's what an efficient equilibrium would be, or disposition of resources for a simpler economy that didn't have supercomputers. Okay. But then once you allow for the fact that in the economy are those supercomputers that private businesses could use to do marketing or product development, whatever, then you can't also use those same supercomputers to solve the economy. You get what I'm saying? So
yeah. Do you think in principle that because Hayek's knowledge problem is different, about it all being localized such that no aggregate. Do you think that AI could conceivably have such knowledge?
For the listeners, people who are Rothbardians like to stress the distinction between the Hayekian knowledge problem and the Misesian calculation problem, both pertaining to socialism. I don't think they're just picking a fight for no reason or whatever. Like, I think it's real. I'll link folks. I've written on this stuff. And the Hayekian knowledge problem specifically says it's dispersed knowledge. And so Hayek is saying there's lots of like tacit that like, how to ride a bike. You couldn't teach someone how to ride a bike via like the mail or a telephone call or even typing stuff up. It's not the kind of knowledge. And so Hayek's point was the central planners, in the capital city of the country, they're not going to have all the knowledge. Like, yeah, they can know like engineering principles and things like that, but there's a lot of on the ground knowledge that the guy who's runs the factory in Boise, that he just knows like, oh yeah, I've been in this business for 15 years and I'm just telling you this time of year this happens. And it would be hard. Like, he wouldn't even know that he knew it. He wouldn't even know that he needed to communicate that. It wouldn't even occur to him. So there's no way, even in principle, all that stuff could get into the minds of the planners when they're coming up with a grand plan, right? So that's kind of Hayek's point. As you're asking Adam, does AI? I mean, it probably does in the sense that, like, people are talking about. Ultimately, it's not just now that Amazon, like, if you go, like, it studies your browsing, your habits and your purchases, and then suggests for you. And like after a while, it's like, oh, this is pretty good. People are even saying it might get to the point where it just delivers stuff to your door. And you just open like, oh yeah, this is good. And maybe once in a while it'll be off, but on net, you'll be glad it does that rather than even asking you ahead of time. It just, quote, surprises you, but it's not even like a surprise. It's kind of like, when you go out, like if you ever been to like a fancy resort, Adam, like especially if it's like in Mexico or something, this is where I've seen it, and you come back and the maid doesn't just do your room up, but like might take a towel and turn it into like a flamingo or something and leave it on the bed, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I knew I even wanted that, but when I came back and saw the maid had done that, I was like, oh yeah, that's a nice touch. So I'm just saying, yeah, I could see but again, even if that's true, that doesn't mean so therefore socialism works. It just means the AI could be used by the private companies in a market-based,
right,
decentralized system to provide that much more
even better
happiness to the consumers.
Absolutely. All right. Well, has your view on Peter Thiel been enlightened by this discussion?
By this discussion, yes. Like, I actually, in talking with you, I'm more alarmed by the guy. But still, Peter, if you want to talk.
Give me a call. Not Alex Karp, though. That guy's weird. All right. Are we done?
I think so.
No more nuggets. Folks, don't forget, go check out theswanbrothers.com/cross. If you're affiliated even tangentially to an organization with people, they can do stuff for you. Go find out what. And also check out the Bob Murphy Show if you're not doing so presently, and check out Haman Nature on YouTube, and also hamannature.substack.com. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, and folks, if you don't know what we were talking about earlier, go read the Book of Revelation. It might be pertinent real soon.
Oh my.